The rain fell on the streets of New York with a cold, indifferent persistence, blurring the city lights into watercolor streaks on the black asphalt. Quan Jae-hwan felt the chill not in his bones, but in the hollow space that had lived inside his chest for 5 years. He walked with a stillness that defied the chaos of the city, his custom-tailored suit shedding water like a raven's wing. He was a man who commanded silence, who moved through the world as if he owned the very air others breathed. It was on a corner slick with oil and fallen leaves that the world stopped. Under the sputtering yellow glow of a street lamp, he saw her. Lena. Her name was a ghost on his tongue, a memory sealed in amber. She was just as he remembered, yet entirely different. The soft strength in her jaw was still there, the deep, intelligent eyes that had once seen straight through his armor. She wore a simple beige dress that clung to her form in the damp air, a shield of quiet elegance. But she was not alone. On either side of her, holding her hands, were two small girls in identical bright red dresses, their hair braided with meticulous care. They were mirror images, their faces tilted up at their mother, chattering with the unself-conscious joy of childhood. Jae-hwan froze. The city noise, the rain, the entire world receded until there was only the tableau under the light. Lena's head lifted, a sixth sense alerting her to his presence. Her eyes met his across the 20 feet of wet pavement, and for a heartbeat, there was no time, no betrayal, only recognition. Then, stark and immediate, fear flooded her face. It was a visceral thing, tightening her skin, widening her eyes into dark, haunted pools. He saw her knuckles go white as she gripped the small hands in hers. One of the girls, seeing her mother's terror, looked at him. Her eyes. They were his. The same shape, the same obsidian intensity that stared back at him from his own reflection. It was impossible. It was undeniable. He took a single step forward. Lena took a single step back, pulling the children closer, her body a shield. Lena, he said. His voice was rough and used for her name. It sounded like a key turning in a rusted lock. Have you ever had the universe collapse into a single moment, a single face, and known that nothing would ever be the same again? He watched her turn and hurry away, the red dresses of the little girls flashing like warning beacons in the gloom before they disappeared into the shadows of a brownstone. Jae-hwan did not follow. He stood in the rain, the water soaking through the shoulders of his coat, feeling nothing. The cold that had been his companion for 5 years was now a raging fire. He felt the phantom touch of her hand on his arm, the memory of her laughter in his sterile penthouse apartment. He had erased her. He had ordered his mind, his heart, his entire life to operate as if she had never existed. It was the only way to survive the gaping wound of her departure. He had told himself she left because she was weak, because she could not handle his world. He had believed the lie because the truth was unthinkable. Now, the lie was in ashes at his feet. He saw the girls' faces again, superimposed over the rain-streaked city. His eyes. His jawline on one, the curve of his mouth on the other. They were 6, maybe 7 years old. He did the math, his mind a cold, precise calculator. 5 years since she had vanished. They were conceived before she left. They were his. A tremor went through him, a seismic shock that threatened to shatter the iron control he had cultivated his entire life. He had mourned a betrayal that was a lie, and she had hidden his children from him. The rain was heavier now, plastering his black hair to his forehead. He finally moved, turning not toward his waiting car, but walking aimlessly, the city a blur of noise and light that could not penetrate the storm inside him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a single number. Minjun, his most trusted subordinate, answered on the first ring. "Find her," Jae-hwan commanded. There was no preamble. No explanation. The woman who just left the corner of Barrow and Hudson. Lena Washington. And the 2 girls with her. I want everything. Her address, her job, her friends, every breath she has taken for the past 5 years. I want it on my desk by sunrise. He hung up before Minjun could reply. He stopped walking and looked at his hand, turning it over under the streetlight. A pale, thin scar ran across his knuckles, a memento from a life she had run from. He had gotten it the week she left. He had once thought of it as a mark of her abandonment. Now, he wasn't sure what it meant. What had he lost that night? And what had been stolen from him? 5 years earlier. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of the city and the sound of Jae-won's steady breathing beside her in the king-sized bed. Lena lay awake, tracing the patterns of moonlight on the ceiling. She loved these quiet moments, the stillness that existed only within these walls, a stark contrast to the violence and tension of his life outside. He was a dangerous man, she knew that. She saw it in the deference of his men, the fear in his enemies' eyes, the cold precision with which he moved through the world. But here with her, he was just Jay. His guard would fall, his hard edges would soften, and he would let her see the man beneath the armor. She slipped out of bed, pulling on his silk robe, the one that smelled of his cologne and sandalwood. It enveloped her, a familiar comfort. She was going to tell him tonight. She had the positive test tucked away in her drawer, a secret joy she had been holding for a week. She wanted to wait for the perfect moment. She padded barefoot into the living room, heading for the kitchen to get a glass of water. The sprawling penthouse was dark, the floor-to-ceiling windows showing a glittering, indifferent city. As she passed the guest bedroom, she heard a sound. A soft murmur. She paused, her heart giving a little lurch. One of his men, perhaps, staying the night? But the sound was female. A soft laugh. Lena's blood ran cold. She moved toward the door, which was slightly ajar. A sliver of light cut across the dark hallway. She peered through the crack. And she saw them. Jae-hwan was not in their bed. He was here. He was standing by the window, his back to her, shirtless. And with him was her sister, Aisha. Aisha was wearing Lena's favorite lace nightgown, the one Jae had bought for her in Paris. She was looking up at him, her hand on his bare chest, right over his heart. She said something Lena couldn't hear, and he didn't move, didn't push her away. He just stood there, a statue of granite and shadow. The world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was her sister. The one person in the world she had trusted implicitly. The room felt airless, the walls closing in. Lena backed away from the door, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a sob. She couldn't breathe. She saw the scene on a loop, her sister's hand on his chest, the intimacy in her gaze, his stillness, his acceptance. She stumbled back to their bedroom, her movements frantic, clumsy. She ripped off his robe as if it were on fire. She dressed in the dark, her hands shaking so violently she could barely zip her jeans. She grabbed her purse, her keys. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't take anything that belonged to him, that belonged to this life. She just ran. She fled the penthouse, the doorman barely registering her tear-streaked face as she bolted into the pre-dawn chill, leaving behind a life that had just been revealed as a beautiful, elaborate lie. The positive pregnancy test remained in the drawer, a secret that now felt like a curse. Present day. The library was Lena's sanctuary. The hushed quiet, the smell of old paper and binding glue, the endless rows of stories that were not her own. It was a place of order, a fortress she had built against the chaos of her past. She was shelving books in the history section when a man in a pristine dark suit approached her. He was not one of the usual patrons. He moved with a quiet purpose that set every nerve in her body on high alert. "Ms. Washington?" he asked. His voice was polite, but his eyes were not. They were sharp, assessing, missing nothing. She recognized the look. It was the same look all of Jae-won's men had. "I'm Min-jun," he said, confirming her fear. "Mr. Kwon would like to speak with you." Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. She clutched a heavy volume of world history to her chest like a shield. "I have nothing to say to him. That is not a request," Min-jun said, his tone still maddeningly calm. He held out a sleek, black burner phone. "He will call this number in 1 hour. Please answer it." It was a threat delivered with the grace of a business transaction. He placed the phone on the shelf next to her, a dark omen amidst the dusty books. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing as silently as he had arrived. Lena stared at the phone. It felt like a bomb. For 5 years, she had lived in a state of carefully managed fear, always looking over her shoulder, always ready to run. She had created a small, safe world for her daughters, Sana and Minji. A world of parks and picture books, of scraped knees and bedtime stories. A world Jae-hwan could never be a part of. His world was one of shadows and blood, of unspoken rules and brutal consequences. He would destroy their peace. He would claim them. He would take them from her. The thought was a shard of ice in her gut. She had to run. Again. But where could she go that he could not find her? He had found her here, in the biggest city in the world, where she had believed she was invisible. Her pocket buzzed. She jumped, her breath catching in her throat. It was her personal phone. The caller ID read, Aisha. Her sister. Her hand trembled as she answered. Lena? Hi, I was just thinking about you. Aisha's voice was smooth as silk, the same voice that had offered comforting lies for years. How are you? How are my beautiful nieces? The timing was too perfect, too cruel. Lena felt a wave of nausea. Was she involved? Had she told him? We're fine, Aisha, Lena said, her voice tight. I have to go, is everything all right? You sound stressed. The faint concern was worse than open hostility. It was a twisting of the knife that had been lodged between her ribs for 5 years. I'm just busy, Lena lied, ending the call. She looked from her own phone to the burner phone on the shelf. 2 different worlds, 2 different betrayals, both converging on her in this quiet, peaceful library. The clock was ticking. In 1 hour, he would call. And she had no idea what she was going to do. Jae-hwan sat in his office, the skyline of Manhattan spread out before him like a kingdom he no longer cared for. The report from Minjun was on his desk. Lena Washington, 32. Employed as a librarian at the City Public Library. Lives in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. No romantic partners. No close friends outside of a few colleagues. Her only family contact, her sister, Aisha Washington. The report included photographs. Lena pushing a swing in the park. Lena carrying groceries. And the girls. Sana and Minji. One of them had a small gap between her front teeth when she smiled. The other had a serious, watchful expression. His expression. He picked up a photo of Minji staring directly at the camera, her dark eyes unblinking. It was like looking at a photograph of himself as a child. A child he never knew he had. The rage was a cold, clean thing now. It had burned through the shock, leaving behind a diamond-hard certainty. He had been deceived on a scale so profound it defied comprehension. He sifted through the timeline in his head. Lena had vanished. The next morning, Aisha had come to him, her face a mask of sisterly concern. She's gone, Jay, she had said, her voice trembling. She told me she met someone. An artist. She said she couldn't live this life anymore. She said she was sorry he had believed her. It had fit the narrative he had already constructed about Lena's fragility. He had been a fool. An absolute, blind fool. He had let another person's words define the woman he loved. He had not questioned it. He had sealed the wound, buried the memory, and moved on. An empire of denial. But why would Lena run? The scene Aisha had described of Lena confessing to an affair felt wrong. It wasn't her. Lena was direct. If she was unhappy, she would have faced him. She would have fought. She would not have slunk away in the night like a thief. Unless she had seen something. Or thought she had. His mind replayed that night. He had been in a meeting that ran late. He came home exhausted. He remembered going to the guest room to avoid waking Lena. He remembered Aisha being there, waiting for him. She had been staying with them for a week. She had a glass of whiskey for him. She was talking, something about her career, her frustrations. He hadn't been paying much attention. He remembered her putting her hand on his chest, her voice getting low, intimate. He remembered a flicker of annoyance. And then, nothing. The memory was blank until the next morning when she told him Lena was gone. He picked up the burner phone. It was time. He would get the truth. Not Aisha's version. Not his own flawed reconstruction. He would get it from Lena. And then he would bring his children home. The burner phone rang, its shrill, electronic tone an assault on the quiet of Lena's small apartment. The girls were asleep, their small bodies curled up in their shared room, blessedly unaware of the storm that was about to break over their lives. Lena stared at the phone on her kitchen table, her hand shaking as she reached for it. She pressed the answer button, her throat too dry to speak. Lena, his voice was unchanged. Low, controlled, each syllable a precisely weighted stone. It cut through 5 years of silence as if they were nothing. Where are you? He asked. It wasn't a question. It was a demand for her location, her coordinates in his world. Why are you doing this, Jay? She whispered, her voice fragile. Leave us alone, they are my daughters, he stated. It was not an accusation, but a declaration of fact. A fact that stripped her of all her defenses. No, she said, the denial weak, pathetic even to her own ears. They are not, do not lie to me, he said, and the coldness in his voice was terrifying. I will not tolerate it. Their eyes, Lena. They have my eyes. She squeezed her own eyes shut, the image of his face, so like Minji's, burning behind her lids. Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. I want to see them, he said finally. And I want to see you. We need to talk, there's nothing to talk about. You made your choice 5 years ago, the bitterness was sharp on her tongue. My choice? A hint of something, confusion, anger, entered his voice. You are the one who left, I saw you, she burst out, the words tumbling out in a rush of long-suppressed pain. I saw you with her. With Aisha. In our home, another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was dangerously soft. What exactly did you see? Lena described the scene, the darkened room, Aisha in her nightgown, her hand on his chest. As she spoke, the memory felt flimsy, a series of snapshots without context. But the feeling it had produced, the absolute certainty of betrayal, was as real as the phone in her hand. Aisha told me you left with another man, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Lena's world, which had already been tilting, spun completely off its axis. A lie. Aisha had told him a lie. Why? Why would she do that? That's not true, she breathed. I know, he said. The simple affirmation was devastating. It meant he believed her. It meant the foundation of her fear, the entire reason for her flight, might be built on a lie. Tomorrow, he said, his voice regaining its command. Lunch. My restaurant, Spiro. A private room will be ready. 1 o'clock. We will finish this, he hung up. Lena was left holding a dead phone, her mind reeling. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't threatened. He had simply presented a new fact, a piece of the puzzle she never knew was missing. And with it, he had dismantled her entire reality. For 5 years, she had been the victim of his betrayal. But what if they were both victims of a different one entirely? The drive to the safe house was silent. Jae-hwan sat in the back of the armored SUV with Lena, a daughter asleep on each of their laps. Minji was curled against his chest, her small hand fisted in the fabric of his shirt. Sana was nestled into Lena's side. The immediate threat was over. Aisha was gone. After her desperate attempt to use the girls as leverage by tipping off a rival faction to their location, Jae-hwan had dealt with her. The confrontation had been swift, brutal, and final. He had met her in a sterile warehouse by the docks, the air thick with the smell of salt and decay. Lena had been there, standing behind him, a silent, steely presence. Aisha, stripped of her elegant pretenses, had been reduced to pleading and spitting venom. He would have chosen me, she'd shrieked at Lena, her face ugly with years of resentment. If you hadn't been in the way. Jae-hwan had said nothing. He simply looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw her own erasure. You will be sent to our family in the countryside, he'd said, his voice quiet, lethal. You will not contact us. You will not see the girls. You will not exist for us anymore, and that was that. A life excised. Now, in the aftermath, a different kind of tension filled the car. It was the awkward, fragile silence of two strangers who knew each other's bodies and souls, but had forgotten how to speak the same language. The safe house was a modern home tucked away in the Hudson Valley, all glass and warm wood, a world away from his cold city penthouse. It was a place he'd bought years ago, imagining a different kind of life. A life with her. He carried a sleeping Minji inside, her small weight a profound anchor. He laid her gently on a bed, brushing a stray braid from her cheek. His fingers, so used to weapons and ledgers, felt clumsy, oversized. Lena followed with Sana, laying her down on the other side of the king-sized bed. For a moment, they stood on opposite sides of their sleeping children, the bed of vast, empty space between them. Are they safe here? Lena asked, her voice barely a whisper. No one can find this place, he assured her. I built it to be invisible. He walked to the kitchen and began to move with quiet efficiency, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. He started making jjigae, the spicy stew she had always loved. The familiar, comforting aroma began to fill the house, a ghost of their shared past. Lena watched him, her arms wrapped around herself. He was still a dangerous man. But she was seeing him now not as a mafia boss, but as a father. A man who had been lied to. A man who had lost 5 years. She had run to protect her children from his world, but in doing so, she had denied them their father and denied him his daughters. The weight of that truth was immense. He served the stew, and they ate in near silence at a large wooden table, the sleeping girls visible through the open bedroom door. It was a fragile, surreal domesticity. The first step in a world neither of them knew how to navigate. Later that night, after the girls were tucked into their own room, a profound quiet settled over the house. The rain started again, a gentle drumming against the glass walls. It was the same sound as the night he found them, but it felt different now. Cleansing, not menacing. Lena stood by the massive living room window, watching the water trace paths down the pane. Jae-hwan came to stand beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. The space between them was charged with 5 years of questions, grief, and anger. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft. The words were for everything. For running. For not trusting him enough to confront him. For hiding his children. "I was so scared. You had every right to be," he said, his voice a low rumble. He looked at his own reflection in the glass, at the hard lines of his face. "I never gave you a reason to feel safe in my world. I only ever showed you the walls, not the door." He turned to face her. In the dim light, the shadows softened his features, revealing the exhaustion and pain he kept so well hidden. That night, he began, his voice strained. "Aisha." She came to the guest room. "I was tired. I didn't want to wake you." She talked. She put her hand on my chest. I was about to push her away. "And then you were gone." He finally looked at her, his dark eyes holding hers. "I should have come after you. I should have torn the world apart to find you. But she told me you were with someone else. My pride. It was easier to believe the lie than to face the truth that you could leave me." He reached out, his hand hovering in the air between them for a heart-stopping moment before his fingers gently brushed her cheek. The almost touch that had been a prelude to conflict was now a tentative bridge. She didn't flinch. She leaned into his touch, a silent surrender. "I never stopped loving you, Lena," he whispered, the confession raw, torn from the deepest part of him. Not for a single day. Tears she hadn't realized she was holding back began to fall. He wiped them away with his thumb, his touch infinitely tender. He lowered his forehead to hers, their breath mingling in the small space between them. This was the real reunion. Not the shocked confrontation on a rainy street, but this quiet, painful, and honest reckoning. He closed the remaining distance, and his lips met hers. The kiss was not hungry or demanding. It was a kiss of profound relief, of homecoming. It was the taste of forgiveness, of 5 lost years, and the hesitant promise of a new beginning. In that moment, surrounded by the sleeping sounds of their children and the gentle rhythm of the rain, the walls they had built around their hearts finally began to crumble. 1 week later, the house had started to feel like a home. The girls' laughter echoed in the hallways, a sound that Jae-hwan was quickly learning he could not live without. He found he was a student of his daughter's. He learned that Sana was the artist, leaving crayon drawings on every available surface, and Minji was the strategist, who could beat him at simple board games with a disconcerting frequency. He learned the specific cadence of their bedtime story requests and the exact way they liked their toast cut. Each new discovery was a gift, a small piece of the 5 years he had lost. Lena watched him with a cautious heart. She saw the way his entire posture softened when one of the girls ran to him, the way a small, rare smile would touch his lips when they said something funny. This was the Jay she had fallen in love with, the man who had existed only for her. Now he was expanding, making room in his fortified soul for 2 more people. But the outside world still existed. Minjun arrived one afternoon, his presence a stark reminder of the life they had temporarily escaped. He and Jae-hwan spoke in low, clipped Korean in the study. The door closed. Lena could feel the tension return to the house, a low hum of anxiety. She stood at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. When Jae-hwan emerged, his face was set in its familiar, unreadable mask. "There is a problem," he said. "A consequence of Aisha's actions. It must be dealt with." Fear, cold and familiar, coiled in Lena's stomach. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Are we in danger?" "You are not," he said, the assurance absolute. "I will handle it." He was going to leave. He was going to step back into that world of violence and shadows, and the fragile peace they had built here would be shattered. "Don't go," she said, the words surprising her with their force. "Let your men handle it." "Stay here," he looked at her, and she saw the conflict in his eyes. The pull of his old life, the responsibilities he could not simply abandon, versus the new reality of this family. "Lena, this is who I am." "No," she countered, stepping closer to him. "It's what you do. It's not who you are. Who you are is the man who spent an hour this morning searching for a missing pink unicorn for his daughter. Who you are is the man who hums when he cooks. Don't let them take that away." Her hand found his, her fingers lacing with his. She felt the thick scar across his knuckles. It was no longer a symbol of their separation, but a part of the man she loved, a testament to the life he had survived. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. For a long moment, he was silent. Then he pulled his hand away, walked back into the study, and shut the door. Lena's heart sank. He had chosen his old life. A few minutes later, he came back out. He held his phone in his hand. "It is done," he said. "Minjun will handle the rest." "I'm staying." The relief that washed over her was so powerful it made her knees weak. It was a choice. A deliberate, definitive choice. He had chosen them. He had chosen this. He walked to her, took the knife from her hand, and placed it on the counter. He framed her face with his hands, his gaze intense. "I will protect this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You, the girls, this life. Whatever it takes." It was the most sacred vow he could make. 1 year later. The rain fell against the windows of their new home, a sprawling apartment that overlooked not the harsh grit of the city, but the gentle green of Central Park. It was a compromise, a place of light and air that was still fortified, still safe. Inside, the sound of the rain was a soothing backdrop to a scene of chaotic, happy domesticity. Sana and Minji, now 7, were building an elaborate pillow fort in the center of the living room, their chatter punctuated by fits of giggles. Jaehwan was on the floor with them, a look of serene concentration on his face as he tried to balance a cushion atop their unstable structure. He wore a simple gray sweater, the sleeves pushed up to his elbows. He looked nothing like a mafia boss and everything like a father. Lena watched them from the archway of the kitchen, a mug of tea warming her hands. A year had passed. A year of healing, of learning, of building something new from the wreckage of the old. It had not been easy. There were moments of fear, flashes of mistrust. His world had not simply disappeared. It had been managed, delegated, restructured, pushed to the outer perimeter of their lives, but it was still there. Yet, he had kept his vow. He had protected their peace. He had shown up every day, not just in body, but in spirit. He had learned to trade commands for requests, to replace cold silence with quiet conversation. He was still the powerful, controlled man she had fallen in love with, but his power was now directed inward, toward nurturing and protecting his family. The pillow fort collapsed, and the girls shrieked with laughter, burying their father in a pile of cushions. He emerged, feigning defeat, and pulled them both into a hug, his deep laugh joining theirs. The sound filled the apartment, filling all the empty, silent spaces in Lena's heart. He caught her eye over the girls' heads, and his smile softened, becoming something just for her. He untangled himself from the pillows and walked over to her, his movements still retaining their innate grace. He took the mug from her hands, set it on a nearby table, and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. "You're quiet," he murmured, his lips against her temple. "Just watching," she said, leaning her head against his chest. "I still can't believe this is real." "Sometimes it is real," he said, his voice firm, an anchor in the storm of her lingering doubts. He tilted her chin up, his thumb stroking her jawline. "I found you." A smile touched her lips. She reached up and touched the scar on his hand, which was resting on her waist. It was a part of their story now. The pain, the flight, the lies, the reunion. All of it had led them here. "We found each other," she corrected softly. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city clean. But inside, they were safe. They were whole. They were home. He leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that held no desperation or sorrow, only the steady, comforting certainty of a love that had been lost, reclaimed, and would never be let go again.